And now we're on Daf Nun Aleph on the base. Elolav, we have no choice but to interpret the Mishnah. The Amar Yehuda Makadesh said, Achas michem tiskadesh li. He wasn't Makadesh kulchem, all five, three of which are two sisters, but rather he was Makadesh, one of them. So therefore, the Kiddushin to the two sisters would not passel and undermine the Kiddushin to the Nachrios, Ukitani, and the Mishnah says, Ein ha'achios mekudoshos. So what does that mean, Ein ha'achios mekudoshos, in a case where he said one out of the two? The only explanation that you could offer as to why the Ein ha'achios mekudoshos is if you hold that it's Kiddushin she'ena Mesur L'biyah. And therefore, to summarize, L'rava kasha reishal abai kasha seifa. The reish of our Mishnah seems to imply that only if he's Makadesh both sisters together, the Kiddushin is not Chal, but had he been Makadesh one out of the two, then it would be Chal. We wouldn't know which one would be Chal. And that's against Rava, because the case of Kiddushin she'ena Mesur L'biyah. And L'bai kasha seifa, because the Sefer seems to imply that if a man was Makadesh one out of the five women, and amongst the five women there are two Achios, the Kiddushin is not Tofis on the Achios at all. But according to Abai, Kiddushin she'ena Mesur L'biyah is Chal. And it's a valid Kiddushin. The Gemara explains, Abai mitaritz l'tame v'Rava mitaritz l'tame. Each one of these two shitos in the plukta about Kiddushin she'ena Mesur L'biyah, Havi Kiddushin, which is Abai, or Lo Havi Kiddushin, which is Rava, will interpret the Mishnah in the light of his shita. The Gemara begins with Abai. And the Gemara now is going to explain first the Reisha of the Mishnah according to Abaye, and then the Sefer of the Mishnah according to Abaye. And the same for Rava. Abaye mitaritz l'taimei Hamakadesh isha ubita o isha v'chosa ka'achas einon mekudoshos. And we're going to apply the principle of Rabbah that kol she'ena b'zecher zafilu v'sachas eino. If he would have been Makadesh achas me isha ubita or me isha v'chosa mekudoshos. Why? Because he's not trying to Makadesh both of them. So the principle of Rabbah of Vasachas Eino doesn't apply here. And one of the two will be Mekudoshos. We don't know which one. It's Kiddushin she'ena Mesur L'biyah. Abai holds a Kiddushin she'ena Mesur L'biyah have a Kiddushin. V'im Amar haro'uya L'biyah tiskadishli. But if he specifies that one of the women that I want to be Makadesh has to be Ra'uya, then Eino Mekudoshos. Then he made it tonight, and therefore it's Eino Ruya L'biyah. But if he hadn't added the Tanai, then Eino Chinami, one of the two would be Mekudoshos, even though Mitzad Safek would be Eino Mesur L'biyah, because Abai holds Kiddush She'ena Mesur L'biyah Havibiyah. Now we go on to the Sefer. Umayse Nami B'chamesh Nashim B'hem Shtei Achs L'ikerechem Kol Kol Shel Teinu Miyom Ruya L'chem Limi Kem Tiskadish L'Yom Chachomim Ein Achios Mekudoshos. He wasn't mafarish which one of the two sisters he would be married to. He wants to marry, and now it's a situation of Einam Ru'uyos L'biyah, because we have to be choshes that each one might be achos ishto. Just 1 second. So let's just take a minute to calculate why the Sefer is not a contradiction to what? To Abaye. Second. What Abai is answering here, apparently, is take out the word kulchem from the Mishnah. Just And what we were medayik from the Mishnah, that since he said kulchem, is therefore that's it. The reinterpretation of the Sefer in Abaye is take out the word kulchem and instead replace it with re'uya limechem to Scottishly. And he specified explicitly in his condition that only the re'uya would be mekudesh, and there's no re'uya because each one is a chash of a safek achos ishta. Now we go on to Rav. Rav mitaritz l'taimei hamakadesh achas meisha ubita o achas meisha vachosa nasa kvisha kiddush isha ubita o isha vachosa ka'achas ve'enu mekudashos. Right, he cannot be makadesh both the isha and achosa together. So too, he cannot be makadesh one of the two. And the reason for that is because it's Kiddushin she'ena misurim l'biyah. Now we read the Sefer according to Rav. U'maisa nami b'chamesh nashim u'bayin shtei achas v'likei ach v'kalchola shel teirav avalev harei kulchem achas mishtei achios. V'achas mishtei achios mekudoshos v'kalchola zur mekachom ein achios mekudoshos. There's no Kiddushin to either of the two sisters because it's Kiddushin she'ena re'uyim l'biyah. Toshma. There's a Mishnah later on in Samach Dalet and Beis. Hamakadesh is bito stam. In other words, a father accepted Kiddushin for one of his daughters, but he didn't specify which daughter. Is ein habogros bichlal. If he has daughters who are already above the age of 12 and a half, there's no suffix because he doesn't have the reshus to be mekadesh a bas bogeres. So let's be medayik from the Mishnah. Ha ktanos bichlal. However, if he has a number of banos ktanos, then the Kiddushin is chal on one of them. We don't know which one. But the implication of the Mishnah is that they'll all be asuros. Midin Safi Kiddushin. That's against our Rava. Because Amai Kiddushin Misurim L'Biyah Ninu. Because if somebody wants to be be married, culminate a marriage with one of them, then she might be achos ishta. Is tuf to the Rav Hamachal Ravach Mayaskinon she'en sham el gedola uktana. He only has two daughters. One is a gedola, the other is a ktana. And therefore, the Bogeres is out. They can't be Kiddush because he doesn't have reshus to be Makabel Kiddushin for Bogeres. And as far as the Ketana is concerned, okay, he was Makadesh the Ketana. I'm just wondering what the Chiddush is. Not sure. Anyway, the Gemara asks Akasha, how can you tell me that there's only one Bogeres of Bogros Ketani? The Mishnah uses the Lashon Rabim, the grammatical plural. So he has a number of daughters that are Bogros. And let's assume that if he has a number of daughters of Bogros, he probably also has a number of Bonos Ketanos. So how can you say there's only one Basu's a Ketana and only one Basu's a Bogeres? Our answer is my Bogros the Alma. The Mishnah uses and employs a grammatical plural to refer to many different people in the world. That any person who has two daughters, one of which is a Bogeres and the other is a Ketana, then he was Makabel Kedusha for one of them, not for the Bulgaris, but for the Katana. Here's my question. I knew it was coming around the bend. I didn't remember that the Gemara itself asks it. So what's the chiddush of this Mishnah? I mean, it's a double pasha. He can't be Makabel Kiddushin for his Bas Bulgaris. So it's a double pasha that if he only has one Bas Katana, he was Makabel Kiddushin for the Katana. Gemara answers, this Shavi says Shliach. The older daughter, who's already a Bulgaris, appointed her father as a Shliach and gave him a commission to receive and accept Kiddushin on her behalf from anyone he desires. I would have thought, Ki Makabel Kiddushi Adaita Di Dok Makabel. When he was Makabel Kiddushin, he did so as a shliach, even though his primary chiyuv is to marry off his katana, his bas katana. But nevertheless, we have a havmin to say that he was Makabel Kiddushin for his gedola because he was appointed by her as her shliach. A person wants to receive hana, he wants to receive the kesef kiddushin. In the case of marrying off a Bulgaris as a shliach, the kesef kiddushin belongs to the Bulgaris herself. In the case of a katana, the father pockets the kesef kiddushin. What about a case in which the Bas Gedolah said, you know what, not only will you be my shliach to be Makabel Kiddushin, but you can keep the money and put it in your bank account. Gemara says, Afilu hachi, even so, we still assume that he was Makabel Kiddushin for the Katana and not for the Gedolah, even though financially it's equal. Why? A man, as a father, has an obligation to marry off his daughter who's a Katana, and therefore, he has no obligation, he's not morally or religiously obligated to be Makabel Kiddushin for his Gedola, Bulgaris, except that he's a Shliach, but he's not obligated. And therefore, we have to assume that he would not give up on an opportunity to be Makayim his Chiyuv. And the Pasuk says, Vesperos Sechem, the Pasuk in Yomi Anovi, Tnula Anoshim. Rashi quotes this Pasuk. Now, we had a Gemara earlier on Daf Mem Aleph, 10 blot ago, in the name of Rav, that also Liodam Lakadosh is Bidok Shikitana. That it's not advisable for a man to marry off his daughter who's a Katana. So how is it possible that he's Mekayim a mitzvah Kiddushin? And the Rashba raises this question offers three answers. Number one, she has das, and she wants to be married to this guy. So even though she's technically a katana, but she has das, she's mature. Another answer to the Rashba is that if, for whatever reason, there's no chash that she would reject this husband, then he's allowed to marry her off to that husband. And the third answer to the Rashba is that a Nara, who's 12, and she's a Bardas, is still in the Rishus of the father to be Makabel Kiddushin on her behalf. And the father has a mitzvah to be Mekadosh. Oshma, we learned in a Mishnah later on Daf Samach Daladom and Beis Mishi Yeshlo Shtei Kitei Bonos Mishtei Noshim. He was married to one woman, and they had a group of girls and daughters, and then he married a second woman. He has a group of daughters. The Omar, and now he comes forward and he claims Ki Dashtias Biti Agdola. The Eini Odea Ha'im Gdola Shebegdolos. And there are four possibilities, out of which three are plausible. Maybe when I was Makadesh one, I went ahead and I was Makadesh the oldest of all the daughters. That's called the Gedolah Shebegdolos. But the Im Gedolah Shebektanos, it's possible that what I meant was that the Gedolah of my second marriage. A third possibility, Ketana Shebegdolos, She Gedolah and Gedolah Shebektanos. maybe he meant the youngest of the first marriage, who's even older than the oldest of the second marriage, is Kulan Asuros. Each one is going to need a get. Why? From this guy, from this Makadesh, because potentially any one of those three girls could fit this description of Biti Agadola. Chutz Miktanish Miktanos, Divrei Rabbi Meir. Obviously, the youngest of the second group, she's not included in this suffix. So we can prove from this that Kiddushin she'ena mesur lebiachal, and it's against Rava, because the Makadesh could not be married to any one of these banos, because each one is a suffix. Maybe she's achos ishto. And the Gemara answers, Hachamayas kinuk shehukru ulabasof nisarvu. Gemara gives a lumdish answer that the Mishnah is addressing a case that at the beginning, at one point, the Makadesh knew which of his banos he married off. Then later on, he forgot. So since the time of the Kiddushin, it was Kiddushin Aruyim Labia, because we knew and he knew exactly which of his daughters he married off. Therefore, it's Chal on one of the Achims. And now we have a suffix, and therefore all of them need a get. Tekonami, and it's meduyik in the language of the Mishnah, Ktani Eini Yodea, V'lo Ktani Ein Yodua. The language of Ein Yodua would imply that from the beginning it was not known. But Ein Yodea means now, Shema Mino, he had forgotten. So what's the chiddush of Rabbi Meir in the Mishnah? La fuki mit Rabbi Yossi, the Omar lo mochis inish nafshe l'sfeika. Rabbi Yossi is of the opinion that a person does not put himself into a suffix, and therefore, if he was Makadesh Bitan Gedola, then we assume it means the Gedolah Sheba Gedolos, the oldest of the first group of the first wife, which is the oldest of all the many, many daughters that he has. Kamash Malon, Rabbi Meir wants to mechadish that we reject the shita of Rabbi Yossi, the machis inish nafshel sveka, that a person sometimes is machnis atzmo l'safek, and therefore we have to be choshesh for any of the three possible candidates of Gedolah, to the exclusion of the Ketanish and the Ketanis. Toshma, we learned in Masechet Yevamos Daf Chav Gimel Amid Beis, Misha Kiddush Achas Mishtei Achios. The Eini Odea Eze Kiddush, no saying get lazu, forget lazu. Once again, we have a kash on Rava, because if we don't know which of the two sisters that he married, then each one will be asuros misafek bitin shash. Maybe she's achos ishto, and we have a Kiddushin she'ena mesur lebia. How then does the Gemara Masechet Yevamos rule that she needs a get, that both of them need a get? The same answer that we gave before. At the time of the Kiddushin, we knew exactly which of the two sisters, we could identify which one he was Makadesh, and then it got forgotten, and therefore the Kiddushin was Chal, and now we have a suffix, and each one needs a get. Tekonami de Ktoni Ein Yodea v'lo Ktoni Ein Yodua. So what again is the Chiddush in the Mishnah? Sefer Itzrichle. The Reisha is just an introduction to the Chiddush of the Sefer. And what is the Sefer? Mace. If the Makadesh has no children and he dies, V'lo ach echad, he has one brother, Cholitz l'shtein. He cannot be miyabim any one of the two, because you have to be choshev. Maybe the one he's being miyabim, excuse me, is not Eshes Achiv, but rather Achos. That's called Achos Kukasos Asura. However, Hoyulo, Shnayim, if that man who is Makadesh, one of two sisters, dies, and he leaves two brothers, two Yavams, Shnayim, is then Echad Choletz, the Echad Miyabim. So one of them, of these two Yavamim, of the brothers, the two surviving brothers, one of them could be Miyabim, the other sister, because if the Eishes Achiv Hames is this woman, then he's Mekayim the mitzvah of Yibum. And if the Achos Isha Mes, then the Zika was Paka through the Chalitza of the first one. And once the Zika was Paka, then she's Muteres Liyachid. However, in Kadmu V'Kansu, if these two brothers were Miyabim, the two sisters, Ein Motzino son Miyada. Now, the first one was Noeg Shalo Kedin. It wasn't the right way to do it because he was Miyabim and Isha, who's a Safek Achos Kukas, but nevertheless, B'di'eved, she's not Asurala. And Rashi says, "Me'achar she'isur achos kukasu mi'divrei chacham lo konsu oso lo atzio." So now the Gemara is going to explain the chiddush of the Sefer of the Mishnah. Dafka michlitz v'hadar yibume. Only in this case, where one of the two surviving brothers was choletz first to one of the two sisters, then we permit his brother, the other surviving brother, to be miyabim achosa. But to reverse the sequence, this we will not allow. We will not allow one of the two brothers to be miyabim before the chalitz of his brother, because the kapaga b'achos kukasa. We have to be choshesh that he's been miyabim the achos eishes hames who's kukal yibum, which is called achos kukaso, and she's asura olav like achos isha. Toshma another kasha on Rav from the next part of the Mishnah. Shnayim, if there are two men who are not brothers, shekidju shtei achos, and they married two sisters, neither of them knows which one of the two sisters he was mekadesh. Is Zeno Saint Shnei Gitin? The Zeno Saint Shnei Gitin. So it seems that there's Kiddushin She'ena Misurim Labia, and yet the get is required. Neither one of them is permitted to marry one of the two sisters, and nevertheless the Kiddushin is Chal, and that's against Rabbah. I think we're answers Halchanamik Shehukul himself in this Arvudekanami, the Ketoni Eni Yodea, Velo Ketoni Eni Yedua, Shmami, Hihachimai Lememra. Sefer Itzrich. The Mishnah has a chiddush in the Sefer. Mesu, if both Makachim die, each one has a brother who survived him, is then the brother of the first one, Choletz L'Shteim, V'zeh Choletz L'Shteim. And the second brother gives Chalitza to both of them. Each one doesn't know which of the two Achios is Kuka Lo Yavam, and which is kuka to the other one. If one of the Makachim who died has a brother, the other one has two brothers, and here we turn to Daf Nun Beis, then one will be Choletz both Achios, Vashnayim, and the two brothers of the second Mekadesh, Echad Choletz, first he should be Choletz, so one of the sisters, the Echad Miyabim, and afterwards he could be Miyabim, the second sister. Because if it's Eishes Achiv Hames, he's Mekayim Mitzvahs Yibum, and if it's Achos Eishes Hames, then the Zika was already paka from the Eishes Hames to the Chalitza of his brother. And therefore she's not Achos Kukas, and she's Muteres. In Kadmu, if both brothers came v'kansu, and they were miyabim the two sisters, so it means that one of them was choletz. So after one brother was choletz, the two sisters, then kansu shtei achnos ein motzinos on the other. Even though the Rishon was knowing, as we said before, shalom kiddin, because he was biyabim and issues a suffik achos kukas, and unless b'di'evet, she's not asura olav, as we said before, because achos kukas is only the rabbanon. And what is the chiddush of the Sefer of the Mishnah? Dafka michlitz v'hada yibume. Only in this scenario, in which first the brother was choletz, the single brother, right, of one of the Mekadesh. Then one of the two brothers of the second Mekadesh could be miyabim, one of the two sisters, after his brother was choletz. But none of the two brothers of the Mekadesh Hasheni could be miyabim before the chalitza of the brother. That's the single brother, the Mekadesh Harishon. The kapoga v'yavam l'shug. It's possible that he's marrying a woman who is a shomeres yavam to the first Mekadesh, and therefore she's asura linase le'adam min hashuk ad sheyachotz la yavama. So this is where we'll stop over here. The Gemara is going to continue barraging Rava's sheet of Kiddushin, Shein Masur Bli Love and Kiddushin in the next Toshma. And as you know, we paskin like Abaye against Rava in 6 different cases, Yal Kagam. And one of those 6 is Kiddushin. Right, it says Kigam, right? Kuf of Kiddushin, of Kigam is Kiddushin Shein Mesum Labia. We paskin like Abai L'chumra that the Kiddushin is. Okay, then. So that's the daf for today.